watching the movie that we just saw brought back a very interesting experience because you remember that the movie was basically about the Adventures in Synthetic Biology, which is a movie that Drew Endy initiated, produced. I don't know the details, but anyway, it comes from the group around Drew and made its way across the Atlantic Ocean to Switzerland in that particular case. And over the SB 3.0 last year in Zurich, we had at some point a press conference and a gathering with the general public, non-scientifically educated public. And in the days before that, the organization that started this particular, that hosted this particular event, the Swiss Academy of Technical Sciences, sent out this comic to a group of people they thought might be interested. And this comic was turned immediately center stage during the whole discussion. And you could immediately pick apart two very diverse, opposing reactions to this particular comic. One section, which was basically me, found it was very entertaining and motivating if you were able to look with a kind of naive eye at it, trying to get young people enthusiastic about science in general and synthetic biology in particular. And then the other part, which was pretty much the whole group of people who was looking at me, was basically thinking about the story about the wizard's apprentice. I guess you're familiar with the story. The wizard leaves the place, and the wizard's apprentice thinks, okay, now the master's gone, I can use all the tricks to clean up the house, but at some point it spins out of control, and in the end, complete disaster ensues until the master returns and clears up the mess. To me, this was very interesting, a very interesting point about illustrating different perceptions on the American side of the Atlantic and the European side of the Atlantic. I don't know if you can generalize like that, but in this particular session, definitely, it was people looking at this particular comic until the point when the bug with the balloon explodes. I don't know if you're familiar with the comic, but at some point, the experiment goes wrong. Then in the second half of the comic, the guy tries again and builds it this time right. So basically, the Europeans, at least the ones in that particular session, they read until the balloon explodes, and the Americans tend to go on and fix it after that. So this was a very interesting thing to experience. I don't know whether you can really generalize it, but it was, for me at least, it was very illustrating. So before you export this movie to Europe, be sure to run some tests with focus groups. Some word about synthetic biology education in Europe. When I was at the first SB conference in Boston, there was this strange guy called Randy Redberg talking about the competition, which was completely new to me. I've been through a European Technical University in Braunschweig, not the most famous one in the world. And we had a relatively straightforward European scientific education, lots of lab practices and so on, but there was never anything about competition in our education. So this was completely new to me. Randy talked about basically getting together a couple of American universities, groups from American universities. These people came down, sat there in front of, 300 people, and talked about these slightly interesting projects that we're going to do. I mean, these were student views, rather interesting topics that they were going to do over the summer and then present next time. Obviously, this was kind of what could student teams do. So next time at SB 2.0, it was pretty clear that they could do a lot. Then this was I forgot the names. First one was in SB 1.0 was in 2004, right? Yeah, so in 2005, we had gotten excited enough to start our own iGEM team. Just let me put this a little bit in perspective. In SB 1.0 at MIT, there were about 300 participants, exactly 4 from Europe, 2 of which are again at this conference, so we have a pretty good survival rate. To us, it was very, as I said, competition as an education example was to me very alien until I realized that actually it's not. If you look at RoboCop competitions, that's something that goes on already for a very long time. I had to find out. The last one was 400 teams, 2,000 participants in China, and I'm definitely going to pronounce this wrongly, Suzhou, Okay. In 2008, massive thing, massive organization, massive event, obviously very exciting to many student teams, but obviously biology had been kind of barred from this type of educational experience because, in a way, it's not really just going somewhere and putting things together. You need a lab, you need people who are trained. If you haven't been through the Ministry of Disenchantment that Drew talked about, you need people with a certain confidence to get you going, to do these things. And all of that is not so easy. And obviously, iGEM is a way to try to address these things. And it has brought a completely new form of competition to biotechnology, one that I felt was an extremely effective one to address students. I was a little surprised about the feedback we got at ETH in Zurich, because I wasn't sure that this was really also something that would attract natural science students, but in fact it did. Although we have to say that natural science students in our teams usually are in a minority. Many people we get from hardcore engineering departments. We get some from the biotech side and a few from hardcore biology or chemistry. We usually spread our word in the entire university. We send emails to basically every student, undergrad, master, and PhD, and then assemble our team from the feedbacks we get to these particular mails. There's some things that I find particularly attractive about the iGEM format in general. You have heard about this from Ron Weiss or from Rennie Redberg at some other occasion. We have a group of students working on a project instead of doing homework or exercises. The one particular interesting thing that I find is extremely helpful also in teaching is that the students are forced to work on both areas. They were forced to work on wet lab and theoretical, or if they're not forced to do it themselves, at least they get a first-hand experience on what it means to do cloning, to fail in cloning. They understand how hard it is to get a consistent set of data that you then can use for modeling and so on. What I find particularly attractive about iGEM is that there is a certain element of curiosity. I'm sorry, this is misspelled. And I didn't really find the English word for this. That's my ignorance, of course. But a certain feeling of being able to play with things rather than going into the lab and thinking from the very beginning, oh, this is going to be tough. It's going to be very difficult. There's a playful area about the whole thing, which I feel is very attractive to many students. And of course, it's very nice if students from all over the place can go to Boston and compete against the Harvard team or an MIT team or an Imperial College team and find out that all these people basically do the same things as they do. They fight with the same problems, have the same type of successes. So I think this is just an excellent way to get students enthusiastic about synthetic biology or science in general. One of the problems we have in Europe, at least that we have in continental Europe, I guess, it's a little difficult to adapt. The format is a little difficult to adapt to the academic calendar. We tend to have exams during semesters, for example, which typically interfere with a period of high excitement around iGEM. So basically, they have done all their studies, the parts are coming in or not, and then they should actually be going, and then exams kick in. So that's a little drawback of this particular format, but so far we have always found a way to work around this based on this enthusiasm of the student. Maybe also one point regarding the main message of the movie that we just saw, where at least very convincingly the idea was created that it's basically calling gene art or code on devices or whoever you call, and 2 weeks later the story is all over. I have to admit that in the 4 years of iGEM experience that we have at ETH Zurich, there was 0 years where we have been able to get all the parts back that we ordered. None. Let alone the time frame. So that's another thing. So you order, and then 2 weeks,
Of course, it's never 2 weeks. We've never so far obtained all the parts in time, and we have never obtained all the parts. So I think there's a set of problems that we simply don't understand, and we should, I think, to a certain extent, obviously not in such a commercial as we just saw, but to a certain extent, we need to be a little bit careful about overselling the story. One particularly important point, it appeared to me when we started iGEM in ETH, was financing. Because from the university where I came from, the idea of getting a substantial part of money from anywhere to do an educational thing was completely unknown. I had no idea that this was possible. Luckily at Zurich, and then the other team that started together with us in 2005 was from Cambridge. These were universities who are typically rather well off, and where new educational experiences or opportunities can simply be explored. You go to your dean or wherever you go, you ask for a little bit of money, and then usually you get it if you come up with a reasonable story. And this is the way how it worked for us. The university stepped in and just put some money into the pot and then helped us explore the various things. However, I thought this would be extremely difficult to transfer to other more normal universities in Europe. So then we went on. 2005, the first time, it was, if I remember correctly, we were 12 teams at iGEM, and 2 were from Europe. It was Cambridge and ETH. And just to point out, I mean, it's a simple calculation, but I need the number later, 50% were from UK. 2006, numbers increased. There were 6 European teams, still 50% from the UK. 2007, 12 European teams, slightly less from the UK, 42%. And as far as I checked the set of teams yesterday, 23 European teams are going to be there in 2008, and still an absolutely overproportional number from the UK. I'm pointing out the UK stuff because I think this is the one place in Europe where the educational story has hit home hardest or most impressively. In 2006, the thing that happened was that we were able to secure funding from the European Union based on the assumption that it would be very difficult to get substantial amounts of money for an iGEM project, and it costs a lot of money after all. You have to fly the students over to MIT, you have to house them there, they spend consumables in the lab, etc. So we did something that was actually rather unusual. We applied for the European Union to support teaching at undergraduate and master's level. And for some strange reason, the proposal was accepted, and we were able to pour 170,000 euros in 2006 and 2007 into supporting 18 teams to go to MIT. And when the funding ended in 2007, we were extremely worried to the fact that it wasn't really clear what happened when this support would run out. There might be university communities where it's more normal to recruit money from the outside, but in continental Europe, I had the feeling that this was not particularly common, so I was very worried. At some point, there was an organization funded called iGEM in Europe that wanted actually to try to help organize funding for European teams. In the end, this effort didn't work terribly well. And basically, the purpose of the whole iGEM in Europe thing was kind of undermined when we saw the number of teams that had applied for 2008, so with no additional European Union funding available. Because as you can see, this has essentially, again, almost doubled, even though the support is no longer available, which makes me wonder whether my initial assumption was correct, that these type of things are difficult to do in Europe. It seems they're not. So from the very beginning to 2008 at least, it has been a tremendous growth curve, iGEM in Europe. I hope to see it continue because I think it's a great educational thing to do. But we will see. And apparently money is not a substantial obstacle, which I find just terrific. One question, of course, that I thought I should address is the question whether iGEM has kind of trickled down into other educational programs. I tried to do a thorough search about European synthetic biology programs, and I basically found two. Let me start briefly with the one that we run at ETH. We started a course in synthetic biology in 2006. We means basically three professors, one from mechanical engineering, one from computer science, and one from electrical engineering. We actually intended this course to be a preparation for iGEM, so that the people, when they come to iGEM, they have already all the basics, even if they come from a hardcore mechanical engineering department. Because this is such a broad target group for the course, we deliberately make no restrictions on entering the course. We have to work on a lot of introductory stuff. So we teach basic biology to mechanical engineering students, engineering design to biology students. They get introduction to dynamic mathematical modeling and parameter estimations and the like. And of course, this creates obvious problem because the semester is only 14 weeks and you can only do so much. And we have to acknowledge that without putting them all together in a team in the end and making them work together on something, it's very difficult to get across the enthusiasm that you can have inside a project. So we still think it's a successful course, but obviously it's not. It doesn't have the same flavor as an iGEM project. Still, it's a good preparation. The way out of this particular deadlock in our case was a very elegant one, because the ETH has decided to found a new department and a new location in Basel. It's called the Biosystems Science and Engineering Department. As we are now basically hosted in a very sympathetic unit at ETH, we can hook the training in synthetic biology up to a master's program. So there will be a master in biotechnology in which you can specialize in synthetic biology in the future. We're working on the various elements of the curriculum. We have not completely tied this down yet, but we're basically very excited that this will be possible in a year or two from now in Basel. Actually, this is not necessarily something we do isolated. As part of a European program called Emergence, Alfonso Jaramillo, Jim Haseloff, and me got together and tried to think about something like a European master. As you might imagine, this European master thing has a positive ring in Europe because it allows you to travel across borders, see different countries, and if it's typically connected to good schools, these type of programs tend to attract very attractive students, very capable students. Alfonso had the lead in this and worked out the program, which for a couple of intra-European formal reasons, for the time being, is basically the second year of a 2-year master program in France, hosted at the École Polytechnique in Paris. And the idea is to give these students a very focused education in the biological engineering disciplines, basically in Paris, and then to rotate these students for research days through the 3 schools. At the moment, this program or this proposal sits with the French Ministry of Education in Paris. They had one or the other problem with one or the other question, but we hope that we can solve them within the next weeks or few months, and then can start looking seriously for students. Just to give you an idea of the syllabus of the course contents, obviously again a strong introductory component to get the various people to the stage where they can take courses together, and then ideas on design, construction, modeling for design systems, molecular modeling, integrated spatial view of cellular machinery, symbolic approaches, integrated modeling for physiology, practice of genetic engineering, modeling engineering networks, etc., etc. So again, a mixture of intensive theoretical and wet lab training. I should mention that this course contents has been mainly designed by Alfonso and François Quepes. The third partner here, Jim Hasselhoff and University of Cambridge, they also think about setting up a synthetic biology course containing basically design and assembly. You recognize these elements all over, and you also recognize that various forms can be used to teach these or to bring these to students, either courses or programs. The other program that I need to mention, although there might be other people here also in the audience who might be more capable of pointing the one or the other important point about that particular program, the Institute of Systems and Synthetic Biology at Imperial College is also very seriously thinking about these things, currently implementing a master in research and a PhD program in systems and synthetic biology, starting in the academic year 2008 and 2009. And there is already a final year option in synthetic biology available to undergraduates. And now I have to, I took this from the website, Master of Research in Systems and Synthetic Biology. The course structure for 1 year, pretty much similar to what Alfonso also suggested, introductory courses and core topics, introductory courses covering very intensively quantitative tools, sorts of modeling, biophysics, etc., life sciences, molecular biology, cell biology, experimental techniques, wet lab, and then the core topics, molecular biology, functional genetics, biophysics, systems biology, physiological systems, advances, technology and data analysis, bioengineering, and synthetic biology. Let me point out one potentially obvious parallel. Most of the courses, or basically all the courses I looked at and I found, have a very intimate relationship with systems biology. So obviously, people think that this alliance of understanding systems and then going to construct systems is a very productive one, basically requiring many of the same elements in teaching, then in the end requiring a different perspective, understanding, constructing, okay, but basically in teaching there are obviously many parallels to be explored, and this seems to be a very productive alliance. Yeah, if you are planning to work on synthetic biology, in particular in Europe, but also anywhere else, I'd be happy to know about you, so maybe we can go ahead and share experience or help out with one or the other potential problem. So I'd be happy if you let me know. Or any other of our work package members in Emergence, that's Jim Hasselhoff or Alfonso Jaramillo. Let me briefly thank the European Union for funding the European iGEM projects over 2 years. At least to us, it was a great help, and I need to acknowledge help from the European Union via Emergence for funding our educational efforts. And of course, I also want to thank all the industrial and organizational administrative partners who have supported European iGEM teams over the years and made it possible for many students to come over the Atlantic and go to Boston to MIT. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Can I just make a couple of comments, because I'm Richard Kidney and I'm the head of the Institute of Systems and Synthetic Biology at Imperial, and Professor Fremont's over there. I mean, we worked a lot with Sven on these areas, but just to make it clear, we already have this final year option working at Imperial in synthetic biology, and we ran it for the first time actually in the spring of this year. We had 30 students, half from bioengineering, half from biology, and it worked extremely well. And in fact, the plan and what is actually happening is that a subset of the students who do the final year module went on to basically form the core of our iGEM team for this year. We've done iGEM now for 3 years. And actually, a smaller number of the students from the iGEM team have actually now gone on to do the Masters and will go on to do a PhD. So we see that as quite an important continuum. Sven showed the prospectus for 2009 and 2010. That's because that's just come up on the web. But actually, we're running the course right now. So the course started actually last week, the Masters, and that will lead into the PhD. And, we've, like Sven, we believe very strongly that this is a very important area. But we also believe in terms of the strategy for our institute that in order to, I should point out, because I was having a discussion with one of my American colleagues yesterday about institutes. An institute in Imperial College is an entity which sort of goes right across the college. So, it goes right from biology right through engineering and physics. So it's a kind of cross-faculty organisation where actually faculty in that organisation may also be, or typically are associated with another department. And our strategy is very clearly that we need to not only develop the research, but also develop the teaching. Those two things have to go in parallel as far as we're concerned. So, these developments that Sven's talking about, and, Sven's obviously involved in this as well, we see as being very important.
So in Zurich or in Basel in the future, we will not really have this problem because we're all part of the same department. Right.
Small department, relatively young department, so I basically don't foresee much problems. We're building this up all together, and I don't really foresee these coordination problems. But in principle, of course, you're right, and I don't think that there's any prime way to get out of this than by doing it once, recognizing the mistakes and trying to fix them. I don't think there's any, at least not that I know of, any particular way that might help you to prevent these problems.
Right. How about in UK? Did you have similar experience?
Sorry?
So when you're organizing such a program on synthetic biology, then there will be courses offered by different departments. How do you keep it coherent? Because when the courses are offered, they are not simply offered for this particular group of students, right?
Are offered for this group of students. Right. And I have to say that there are quite wide differences in the UK in terms of different universities. For example, unfortunately, Jim, who's extremely enthusiastic and very energetic, is having lots of problems at Cambridge. At Imperial, it's much easier. We have a whole ethos of working across different faculties, etc. So actually, Paul Fremont, who's sitting over there, who's the head of structural biology, etc., and I just got together and we were doing the research in this area, and we just said, why don't we organise some courses? And we just did it. And then we have 2 graduate schools at Imperial, and we just fed the courses through the graduate schools, and that was it. So it's pretty straightforward at Imperial to do these things. Having said that, if it doesn't work, it will get killed off. That's the difference.
A general comment on the content of the courses, and this may refer also a little bit to George's previous presentation, as beautiful as it was. I find that there is very little in this course in terms of conceptual, I would almost say philosophical background. The whole notion of synthetic biology, that life can be divided in parts, it's a very reductionistic approach, and these kind of things should be said and told. Obviously, the division of part is not the whole picture. If you take a dead horse and a living horse, they all have the same parts, but one is dead and the other is alive. So there must be a difference. And this notion of reductionism and emergence and the whole picture of what makes life in general, I think should be part of the teaching to prevent, this very cold and not very instructive view of a reductionistic view of life and life processes, and should be part of the teaching.
You want to answer this?
No, I don't.
Okay.
Sorry.
So, one thing is that the concept of a part is not necessarily part of the education. We are struggling with the concept of a part. I understand that it's an extremely helpful simplification in terms of the engineering concept, but whether it's ultimately the thing that will also be the big conceptual contribution, for example, of synthetic biology, remains to be discussed. The
topics that you find here are the attempt to view biotechnology through an engineer's eyes. Not more, but also not less. The philosophical question that you approach, I guess, is a question that has accompanied biotechnology and engineering since the early, 1980s. It has never really been part of curricula, and I think there is a reason for that, and that's because it's extremely difficult to find a form to engage the students in a constructive way. I find this extremely difficult. However, it's also clear that synthetic biology has been very open to these sort of discussions ever since Synthetic Biology 2.0 Berkeley. These topics were always present at these conferences. They're also present in Zurich, for example. There are a couple of people who work on that. And we try to foster the link, but to put it into an educational program in a constructive fashion, I find very difficult. And if you have the perfect course for me, I'm happy to accept it. So there's no reason why we should not put it in, but I would need to be convinced that it's a really useful, it's a good use of the student's time. Not because I don't think that the topic is important, but I think you have to find a form that is appealing and that gets us somewhere. It's constructive and appealing. So if you are happy to come to Zurich for 2 weeks, or for two courses in the program, and talk about the origin of life, I'd be happy.
I mean, just coming back on that, I don't think most molecular biology undergraduate degrees actually focus on philosophy or religion at all, or any aspect of it, and I'm not sure whether synthetic biology should or not. But what is interesting actually in the UK is that there's a lot of engagement with social and ethical scientists and researchers being promoted by this field, and that's an interesting development, and maybe that would cover some of your worries about the reductionist approach. Having said that, we're actually doing systems biology, so it's not necessarily reductionist, it's more, I don't see it as a reduction. It's trying to teach students actually that, there are parts, but there are systems, and it's that integration of those two concepts actually. Whether you move the barrier to what is life is something which I think, as Sven said, would have to be done in a very careful way, depending on cultural background. We have international students from all over the world. It's a very difficult area when you get into that sort of philosophical thing. A very interesting point raised, but I don't know how you do it. And if you've got any ideas, please let us know. But I think it's...
I do it since 10 years, but...
As I said, if you would be happy to come...
Do you want to do a European tour?
In this case, to teach 2 weeks in this respect, I'd be perfectly happy.
Okay.
But there are not that many people who help you would do that in this fashion. Of course, you can offer a philosophy course on ethics, etc., surrounding synthetic biology, but I don't know the people who I would want to give the responsibility to construct a full, 2 or 3 ECTS course on that.
It should not be philosophy in an abstract sense.
Of course.
One step.
The
notion of emergence and the notion of reductionism and the notion of system. What is a system? What is this very conceptual framework that accompany the work, not philosophy in an abstract, sky sense.
But
very
engineering
applied.
students would know about the concept of a system. That's, at least as far as I understand, system or engineering education is a lot about understanding systems, not in a biological fashion, but in a more general fashion. The biologist has an intuitive understanding that biology is extremely complex, but is not necessarily trained in putting it in the words of the system. But then again, this would be something that the students are exposed to when they learn about systems engineering. So it's actually, this formal part is part of the education.
Yes.
But not in a transcendent way, of course not.